So Dean Noria, faculty, students, your family, your friends, let me begin with something just profoundly unpopular sentiment. I bring you greetings from Washington, D.C. Class of 2017, I have spent my whole life, 40 years since graduation, loyal to only my own section. And now you bring me this unlikely honor of divided loyalty. I can't tell you how much it means to me. Thank you for having my family and me here with you, and for your great accomplishment. If you're wired at all like I am, you will find it to be a lifetime privilege. Congratulations to you. Forgive me for being so out of touch. It's been so long. I have a question about the sections. Do they still take the very most promising students and cluster them all into section F? I'm afraid I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes proving just the opposite. What a thoroughly mediocre presentation of talent we were, lo, those 40 years ago. I wonder if you'll abide just one Washington story. It has the advantage of being a true story. So you will remember President Clinton, and some of you will remember his second term, the impeachment hearings through which he suffered. Well, during that time, he retained the services of a lawyer named Robert Bennett, a super lawyer in New York City, to navigate that for him. And this is Bennett's story. Bennett says that he and his wife were invited to dinner at the White House, just the two of them with the President and Mrs. Clinton in the private residence. So one summer evening in 1998, he pulled his car up to the southeast gate. That's the side of the White House where the helicopter lands. And to his surprise, the guards opened the gate and instructed him to drive straight up the driveway, just like you would drive on a driveway. And he drove up to the south portico, and the guard there said, well, please get out and park your car anywhere, get out, welcome to the White House. So he helped his wife out of the car, and the two of them were walking in. And the guard said to him, sir, is there any chance you're from New York City? And he turned and he said, yes, I am. How did you know that? He said, well, here at the White House, sir, it's only people from New York who lock their car doors. I have just one administrative matter that the dean asked me to share with you. It's a piece of good news. Many of you have been troubled by this spring's best-selling book, The Golden Passport. For the parents who don't know about The Golden Passport, it's a book by an author named Duff McDonald. It's an unrelenting attack on Harvard Business School and its students. There was good news today. Earlier in a... I'm sorry, I missed the most important part, which is a terrible part, that he refers to Harvard students as a picnic basket of snakes and vipers. So here's the good news. In a partial retraction today, McDonald explained that he stands by the snakes and vipers part, but he meant to be describing Stanford and not Harvard students. He regrets the error. Just in the interest of libel, the whole thing was a joke from first to end. So if you will indulge me in a story, I want to tell you something that's not my own story. I make an appearance in the story towards the end. So just across the river behind me, a mile and a half back into Cambridge, lives an author and freelance journalist named Theo Padnos. Theo is now in his 40s, but he's boyish in his look, and he's boyish in his utterly unencumbered freelance journalist life. Fluent in French, German, and Russian, but it's his fluency in Arabic that got him in trouble. So in the fall of 2012, Theo decided to go to the Syrian border to cover the unfolding chaos inside that country. He settled in a Turkish border town called Antakya. This is the crossing point for jihadists, for smugglers, and for the few Western journalists braving their way into Syria. Soon after his arrival, Theo met 3 young men who were making their living by taking smuggled goods into Syria. They offered to take him across the border and deliver him to the insurrection front lines. Fatefully, Theo accepted. That night, October 20th, 2012, Theo and his 3 guides slipped through a barbed wire fence at the Syrian border and went to a abandoned small home that was near the front lines. I'm going to read to you Theo's own description of what happened next. So this is Theo. The next morning, I helped the young men straighten up the place, cleaning the floors and arranging the pillows in an orderly row on rubber mattresses. They sat me down in front of a video camera and asked me to interview one of them, Abu Osama. When we were done, the cameraman smiled, walked across the room, and kicked me in the face. His friends held me down. Abu Osama stomped on my chest, then called out for handcuffs. Someone else bound my feet. The cameraman aimed a pistol at my head. "We're from Al-Qaeda," Abu Osama said, grinning. For the next 22 months, Theo was added to the rank of Westerners held by Al-Qaeda, moving through makeshift prisons across the rebel-held sections of Syria. For a time, Theo was beaten daily with wooden bats, with PVC pipes, with the butts of his guards' Kalashnikov rifles. He was soaked in water and electrocuted with a cattle prod. He was blindfolded and handcuffed and left in a metal box for 45 days. In total, 660 days in the hands of Al-Qaeda, losing hope it would ever end. Meanwhile, back in the States, the most unlikely search team had formed. My Atlanta colleagues and I had spent some years looking for journalists who had disappeared in the Middle East. So when we came across Theo's mom and Theo's cousins looking for him, we joined forces. If you're looking for hostages, you invariably end up in the small Arab emirate of Qatar. So one evening, June of 2014, 20 months after Theo was captured, I was in the lobby of the St. Regis Hotel in Doha, waiting to be called up to the suite of a man named Ghanem al-Kubaisi. Kubaisi is the head of security for Qatar. The call finally came at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I went up and I gave him 5 pieces of paper. Each had a photograph and a description of a missing American. Kubaisi looked through these flyers, and he stopped over one, Theo's, and he said, this one, I know this one. I can get him. And curiously he said, "Will I do it?" Yes, I'll do it for the mother. 5 days after the beheading of Jim Foley, al-Kubaisi began texting me reassurance that Theo would be released imminently. On Sunday, August 24th of 2014, Kubaisi previewed his release by telling me he was about to cross the Syrian border over into Israel. I keep on my phone almost as a treasure the last text that Kubaisi sent me. It was a thumbs up emoji and the word "done." So what to make of Theo's story? Back in the 1930s, the dime store magnate W.T. Grant gave a large gift to Harvard to do medical studies on 268 undergraduates from the classes of 1942, 43, and 44. They were all men in those days. What they did was they had physicians examine them for their health. They ran them through a battery of 8 psychological exams. They had social workers interview their friends and their faculty members. And Grant even paid for social workers to go to the hometowns of all 268 and interview their family members and their friends to find out the narratives of their lives. Now, what's remarkable is that Harvard found funding for that study on the same 268 people for all of the remainder. The study is still going on. Most of the men have passed now, but those that are still alive are in their 90s. Knowing the detail of each of these individuals, the researchers have been able to do something interesting. They've been able to identify which of the 268 ended life both happy and healthy, reached their 70s and 80s, happy and healthy. And then for that subsegment, they scanned back through 70 years of data and narrative to see if they could find, well, what are the predictors of health and happiness, especially of happiness? They found 3 predictors. I'm not going to do all 3, that's a longer talk, but I want to flag one for you. It's adaptivity, how you respond to setbacks. The Harvard researchers focused acutely on those moments of disappointment that these men suffered across their lives, and then how they responded to it. And they knew every disappointment. They had been tracking them from college straight through death. So every failed romance, every failed marriage, death of a child, career stumble, personal bankruptcy. They studied them all and then what their responses were to it. They came up with a taxonomy of 4 levels of response to disappointment. So at the unhealthy end is bitterness, hardness, denial, paranoia. The healthiest level of response to setback is humor, bemusement, self-deprecation, a sense of teachability, a sense of moving on, all the supple qualities. It seems too particular to be true, but how you respond to setback turns out to be one of the most important things for happiness later in life. And the most remarkable finding of the Harvard, what's known as the Harvard Happiness Study, every one of the 268 students suffered setback across their lives. And dear class of 2017, you will too. We've reached the heart of what I want to tell you. It's my frame on life, which is that life is a sine curve. Do you remember sine curves from trigonometry? They're like radio waves. They're up and down and up and down and up and down. This then is the first lesson that I've realized, or I've come to. This is going to be your life. This is everyone's life. You're up, you're down, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down, on and on and on, unto the end. The only thing you can know at the bottom of the curve is you will come back up. The only thing you can know at the top of the curve is you're coming down. But the top and the bottom of the curve are very different places, and the response that's recommended for each is very different. So the top of the curve is easy. Those are the happy times. The only caution I have for the top of the curve is to have some sense of modesty or self-deprecation or impersonalization of your success, such that if you come down, you've prepared yourself for it. The bottom of the curve is entirely different. It's indescribably hard. There are going to be moments in your life that just take the wind from your sails. A marriage that goes wrong, some great sadness for a child, a career that levels off far below the station that you once expected. There are existential lows, like is there meaning in any of this? I wish I could spare you the bottom of the curve, but the best I can do is share some of the bottom of the curve learning that I've had from my own life. So the central lesson for the bottom of the curve is not to derail. This is no time to radically rethink your life. It's no time to make big decisions. You don't quit your marriage. You don't quit your job. You don't move to Vermont and open a B&B. You don't abandon your children in favor of a lover in Tahiti. The temptation is to escape the hard hour by escaping the circumstances that are around it. It never works. You can't escape the hard hour. So how do you get through it? Well, there's a little bit of learning out of the field of pain management. This is hardly in the league of Theo's suffering, but from time to time, I have lost my voice for as long as a year. And there were stretches where we thought I would never speak again, what they call aphonic. And when my voice left, pain set in. It wasn't hanging on the ceiling kind of pain, but if you told me that you were going to be like that for the rest of your life, I'd say, well, my life is fine, but. So what you're taught with pain is to shorten the horizon. So if you say, I just can't endure this for the rest of my life, you shorten it and say, well, can I endure it for a day? Or can I endure it for this moment? You shorten the horizon to the period you can cope with, and then within that period, you do your duty. You wake up in the morning and you do the thing you're supposed to do. You go to work, or you tend to your family, or you keep your appointments. Dutiful day after dutiful day after dutiful day, until the curve bends back upwards. And it will. It always does. The one last thing to be said about the bottom of the curve. The great religions all speak to this, but so does life itself. Nothing deeply good happens at the top of the curve. Everything that's significant as to nature and character and disposition is accomplished at the bottom. So in popular parlance, we say that a man addicted to alcohol has to hit rock bottom to change. Well, that same insight is true of the human condition generally, of all of our weaknesses and all of our failings. The change comes when you are at the bottom. A prolonged hard hour in your life has the power to change your nature, to reduce you to a distillate, to the pure version of yourself. It's like one of life's ironies that all high character has been produced in the low moments. So meanwhile, what's happened to Theo? Well, 20 of us in Washington had never met Theo, so we invited him to dinner at my house. And we sat him at the end of the table, and for 2 hours, we asked him to tell us about his 660 days with Al-Qaeda. And the story is harrowing. But do you know the shared observation of the 20 of us meeting Theo for the first time? There was nothing broken about this man. If anything, Theo was larger for the experience. He was gracious, he was forgiving of his captors, he was forgiving of the people who tortured him. He was unembittered, he was unscarred. In this, Theo is the poster boy for the Harvard Happiness Study. He's just an astonishing case of best practice in adaptivity. But to say that Theo was unscarred is not to say that he was unchanged. Theo came back imbued with a greater sense of gratitude. I don't mean here gratitude for his release or surely gratitude for the ordeal. I mean a state of gratitude, as if his default state was grateful. 22 months in the hands of Al-Qaeda, and Theo changed to the good. This stuff of change in character is so ephemeral, it's hard to convey, but it's really easy to see in the flesh. So Theo has been spending time just across the river in Cambridge, and I asked if he would come and join my family today, and I wanted to introduce you to him. Theo is over here at my far left. He doesn't know I'm going to do this, but Theo, would you stand for just a moment? Theo, this is Harvard University. If you will indulge me, I want to tell you my own harrowing story. It was my application process getting into Harvard Business School. So the year was 1975. I was 21 years old, and I was visiting Harvard for the interview. I was staying with a friend named Ralph in the Back Bay section of Boston, right across from the Christian Science Church Center. Back then, it was a clearly transitional neighborhood. I had had a pretty bad interview, so when Ralph got back to his brownstone, he offered to take me out to dinner to just acknowledge that it was done. So while he was locking the front door to his brownstone, I was standing out in the dark under an umbrella waiting for him. And a young man joined me under the umbrella, and he asked me for directions on the street. As soon as Ralph finished locking the door, he too came in under the umbrella, and immediately this young man took out a handgun. I don't know how many of you have seen handguns. I had never seen one before. They're very small. It was about this big. And he took the handgun and he put it directly at my forehead. And then he turned to Ralph and he demanded his wallet and his watch. Ralph refused. And we began a countdown from 10 till 3 till Ralph decided his wallet and watch weren't that important. But worse than that for me, the whole incident was filmed on the security cameras of the Christian Science Church Center. Some of you adults will remember ABC's Wide World of Sports and that poor, pathetic, miserable skier who went diving off the side of the long jump every week. Well, in our much more modest way, Ralph and I have become that kind of teaching instruments for the video instruction of Christian Science security guards. And if you were to talk to a guard who went through the course and saw the video, he would say two things. Of Ralph, he would say that he looked frightened and stubborn. And of me, they would say I looked oblivious. And the central detail that they will point to in describing the oblivion is that throughout the entire course of the robbery, I continued to hold the umbrella over this young man's head. Witness the high manners of my early 20s. one part gracious for every one part fool. It's the gracious I want to do here. I want to congratulate the class of 2017, and like everyone else who has arrived, wish you the fullest measure of beauty and blessing and bounty. Godspeed, class of 2017.